Hello and welcome to the Feminine Rising podcast. I am your hostess, Amber Moreno, and welcome. In today's episode, this is going to be a two-part episode. And part one, I'm going to be talking about how I kind of found Christianity and saw all of its flaws and why I decided to leave. And then part two will be how this journey actually walked me towards my authenticity. So, this story is really about my journey in the spirit realm, if you will. As a child, we were always kind of surrounded around the spirit realm, I would say. Either people were talking about religion that were around us or spirits or whatnot. I grew up in Los Angeles County during the 90s, and there is a lot of witchcraft that goes on there in Los Angeles. So, things like Santeria, summoning and channeling spirits was something that was normal, especially being exposed into the acting world where they would literally take on these entities of these past actors and actresses and channel them so that they could become as great as those before them. So it's no, woo woo is nothing new to me in that aspect there. But my dad grew up in the Catholic Church, and my grandparents say that they believe in God and Jesus, and they definitely did to some degree because there were saints all over the house. But they never went to church. I never once saw them inside of a church unless somebody was dying or getting married. Like, it wasn't a thing. My parents, on the other hand, they were always dragging us to church on holidays, Easter and all those like Christian holidays. And so I had that exposure there as well. So I was very aware and very observant of the two different types of realms that existed within the spirit world that we, in a way, as humans created, right? Because organized religion recreated, the spirit realm exists. And it's our almost human right to know how to tap into these things. Coming back to the Christian church and Christian experience that I had, it was very interesting, to say the least. So I didn't have the best relationship with my mother growing up. I could be easily seen as the wild child, the rebellious one, the one that was most likely going to end up in jail, and did not, by the way. I've never been arrested. But all of that is to say, this is around the time when my parents really started honing in going to church. I think at one point we were going to church every Saturday or something like that. And it had to be Saturday night because my dad was getting into like that Seventh Day Adventists, or I can't even say it properly, at the time. And they believe, right, that the holy day is Saturday. And holy day, first off, is supposed to be any day. But anyway, that's not the point. The point of it is I got dragged into this Christianity. And at first I believed it because I didn't really have any stability in my life. Like, my dad was always in and out of jobs. My mom never really had like a good job. And when she did, after the big recession, I think it was back in 2001, she never went back to a corporate job. So financially, we were very unstable, homeless at one point as well. And so I kind of clinged to Christianity for a little bit. And then I kind of let it fall away. I let it fall away when I realized that sexual activity still very much happens in the church. And I've never been sexually abused by anybody, thank God. But I know it exists because I've seen it and I hear about it. And that's kind of when I kind of started to fall out of the church and I just stopped going. I didn't believe in it. I didn't see the facade anymore that was given. So years go by. Let's fast forward. I'm on this teenage kick. I don't believe Jesus is real. I'm not even sure if God's real, but part of me still believes in God because it always hurts when I say that. And it was then that I realized, fast forward to my 20s, that I still wasn't fulfilling a part of me. There was something still there, and I was using guys, I was using drugs, alcohol, partying, whatever, your typical, right? Trying to fill up and numb whatever that is that I can't feel fulfilled in, because I was functioning so completely out of my not self, because I'm an individual. I'm not supposed to be, sardine canned into these organized religions type of things. But when I moved to Hoboken, New Jersey, because I was working in New York City at the time, I decided I needed to find something again. And I convinced my now husband, boyfriend at the time, Christopher, to join me on this crazy little adventure. And so we started attending church, but we didn't really like it. If you've ever lived or do live in New York, you know how it is, right? People are very cliquey, very into their own thing, and that's fine. No big deal. And then we ended up moving to Hawaii, where we got involved with a very heavy Pentecostal type church. They say they're not, but it's pretty Pentecostal. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if anything, there is where I really saw what I believe is what church was supposed to be. It was community. It was love. It was everything that you didn't see here on the mainland. And we found it all in Hawaii, and it was beautiful and it was great. But the only problem is we were still relying on an outside source to fill us when we needed it. And that is where the flaw started to really show, and the facade of everything started to crumble again. It wasn't even the fact of, this was a good church. This was a great church, in my opinion. Nothing sinister was happening on the inside. But what I noticed and I observed is that the false hope was still there. They were giving people this hope in something else and failing to let them know that they had access to it at any time, because God is in you. And the big phrase that we always hear out in Christian churches, right, is you cannot claim to be God. That's blasphemy. But didn't Jesus Christ do something similar? And this is where I started questioning even how the Bible is being read and how the Bible stories are being structured. And to be honest, most of the congregation of these churches that I've been to, they don't read the Bible. They don't know any of the stories. They know like the basic stories because of what is told and preached out in church. But outside of that, they don't read it. And it's like, well, then what's the point of going to this, right? And then it's like, well, because they're looking, again, for that hope in something. They're looking to fill whatever that is, that gapingness that they just, that, I know that feeling. It's hard to explain it, but the feeling I'm talking about. And they go to these churches and they're looking for help, and they can't get the fucking help that they need. They can't, because the church is giving a false hope. And I'm not attacking the church when I say this. Not a specific church, because again, there are really good churches, but are you leading the people to themselves, to the realization that God is within you? And that is where I really did not have I didn't have a leg to stand on anymore. Let's just put it that way. Once I realized that, and I realized that the Bible's story of Jesus, his crucifixion, means something completely different to me. And I've talked about it. If you know me personally, I won't say it on here because I'm not here to make you believe or not believe in Jesus. That's not the purpose of this. The purpose of this is just for me to share my story and my experience as to why I decided to walk away from Christianity and the Christian church and just organized religion in general, and walk into my authenticity and tap into the God source that I have access to. There's a reason that they tell you to pray in church, but they fail to tell you what's actually happening when you actually truly pray and have access to it. I'm going to spit this story out because it just popped into my mind. I don't know where it is in the book. I just know the story exists. It's in the New Testament. I want to say in Matthew, but it's in one of those. And there is a scene going on where Jesus has the disciples out. I think they were on a mountaintop or somewhere in the forest. They were not near the civilization, right? And they're out here and they're supposed to be praying, which is a form of meditation, by the way. And they're falling asleep. They can't even get through the night because they're just like so exhausted, right? And like passing out in their meditation, which I'm guilty of doing, by the way. And Jesus got upset with them. And it's like, people will use that story as to shun them, like, why aren't you praying? But that's not the purpose of the story. The purpose of that story, let's look at what was going on. Like, what are we meditating on? What were they praying about? Like, what were they calling in at that moment? Like, I have questions. And that's another thing why I walked away. Every question I had, I couldn't get a straight answer. It was this, oh, you have to have blind faith. But blind faith in what? You can't even tell me. Like, again, it goes back to I didn't have a leg to stand on. But let's come back to the timeline. I didn't discover this until the past year or so of my life. And so even here where I currently reside in Phoenix, Arizona, I was still trying to get, both me and my husband were trying to get involved in a church, and we did, and we were part of one. And we will not forget it. It was the Easter service, 2022, where we threw our hands up and we were just like, we can't do this anymore. This is fake. This is a lie. And it was just, I couldn't deal with it anymore. And again, I am not saying this to make you not believe in God or Jesus or whatever, you know. If it's triggering, it is what it is. But it's my story of how it all unfolded for me. And the second part of this podcast, I will be sharing the rest of this past year, because this past year has been so wild. And I feel like my husband and I have jumped so many timelines just in general since we've been in Arizona. It's a little creepy, but a good creepy in a cool way, you know. And so I look forward to chatting about that and sharing that story. So catch me in the second part, and I'll see you on over there. If you liked this podcast, please remember to give it a thumbs up. That helps me out. And if you feel inclined, go ahead and leave a comment. I do ask, please leave it specific to the topic. And try not to send too much hate, because I know sometimes some of the topics can be a little triggering, is the word. I love you, and I'll see you in part 2.